Hi, welcome to our presentation on IR35, which is focused from a client's perspective, for those of you who missed it. So let's make a start. By the way, I'm Dennis.
I'm Jared.
Right. So just a bit of background about what we're about. Corvin Fox, we've been supplying interim managers since 2008. We work closely with a legal partner. We've always been getting our contracts reviewed for IR35, but obviously it's come on a level since then. We've been involved in lobbying meetings representing the Recruitment and Employment Confederation with the HMRC, and we've also attended many other conferences. We've done a lot of research. There's quite a lot of content on our website.
There is.
Corvin Fox, and we've been carrying out workplace assessments since December 2019.
Yeah, so a good while now. Really.
Good one. So we'd like to think we've a bit of an idea. So this is the agenda. We're going to cover a bit of background about IR35 and the factors. It's all about the factors. And we'll talk through the legislation, the CEST tool, your options, bit of HMRC challenges, a few myths, and that'll be it really. So what is IR35? So IR35 really started in the late 90s when some IT companies decided to terminate their employees' contracts working for them and get them to come back to work the following day, but they wouldn't have to pay them any they wouldn't have to pay employers' national insurance, which saved about 11%, and they paid the employee, who was now a limited company, a day rate, which was similar to the rate they were on, but they didn't have to pay income tax. So financially, the limited company employed person was a lot better off tax-wise, and so was the company. So a bit of a loophole there, and the government, the Exchequer, was losing out hundreds of millions of pounds because of that. They got quite wise to it quite rightly, because it was disguised employment, i.e. someone was doing the same job as an employee but not paying tax. So they had the Inland Revenue came out with one of their communications, and it was number 35, where they spoke about off-payroll challenges, and that was the Inland Revenue 35. That's how the word IR35 has come about, isn't it?
Yeah, but more interesting, well, not interestingly, but importantly, you won't find the term IR35 in any legal legislation that's brought out. It will be under the name of off-payroll working rules.
That's it. So there's three main factors and then a few other factors that we're going to go through that determine whether somebody is inside or outside IR35, i.e. whether they're an employee or an actual proper limited company. And this is really important, because with the old legislation and with the new legislation, it's all about these factors. So the first factor is mutuality of obligation. So as an employer, Jared is on 3 months' notice.
I am.
I'm obliged to keep you for a minimum of 3 months.
I hope so.
I hope so too. and
vice versa, you know, if I, God forbid, and it's not going to happen, but if I were to get poached, I'd have to give you 3 months' notice as well.
So we're mutually obliged to, from a work perspective, with each other. If we look at a bricklayer who's getting paid per brick or whatever, if it's a rainy day, that bricklayer isn't going to be working. So that is very much, the bricklayer is very much outside of IR35. They are not an employee. Jared is very much an employee. So from a mutuality of obligation, if you look at where you've got interim managers working for you, if you've got them on a long notice period, then that's probably more like like an employee. A lot of our contracts are in a very short notice period, so we have a 1 week. We have it agreed with the client that if the client doesn't need them for certain days, they don't have to come in. And also, if the interim doesn't want to come in for a certain day, they don't have to come in today, or you can finish the contract there and then. So sometimes that can be outside. Obviously, if you've got an interim MD, you want them. You want more of a mutuality there, won't you? Or if you've got a big project. So, but it depends on the role. The next one is substitution. So, for example, let's say you're getting your factory, all the wiring done, the lights, or you get some lights being put into your factory. So you get a company called Lights or Us to come in and do the lighting for your factory. And you might have different electricians in on different days putting in the lighting. That lighting company is a limited company, and they've got different workers, and they're substituting their workers, so they've got different electricians coming in. If an interim, who is a limited company, that says that they can have not just themselves coming in, but they can substitute themselves for other people. Now, the likelihood of that happening isn't.
It's not high. It's not high.
I think we've hardly come across it. We have come across it a few times, but that is substitution. Now, we have actually had sometimes for maybe some planning roles or technical roles, we've had it. But also what's happening lately is the client has the right to refuse the substitution if they want to.
Yeah, so it can be in place, but you can refuse the individual substitute itself. It can be quite a tricky one, can't it? But it's always worth having that open conversation.
And the next one is supervision, direction, and control. So, for example, with Jared, from supervision, direction, control, we've got a monthly PDP review. We've got you come in at 9, you go at 5. We've got standard operating procedures that you work to, etc. So that is very much inside supervision, direction, and control. Whereas outside, that's where you've got a good word for this.
Yes, it's that the interim or the PSC operates with autonomy.
Yes. So for certain jobs, potentially not. So for a shift manager or for a certain type of role, but we've had, for example, an operations director where they wanted to they needed to do £1 million turnaround. So, they weren't controlled. They were told, look, we need to get £1 million turnaround. So they decided when they came into work, they decided how they were going to deliver that turnaround. So they had the autonomy to make the change.
Yeah, they were the expert. They set the vision.
Yeah.
There are other factors which do help to support those three. Alternative work being one of them, and from a client's point of view, it's about allowing the interim to work for whoever they would like to work for. So if you've got a salad company, for example, and you're getting Lights or Us in, you won't mind if Lights or Us are going to fit
in another place,
in another salad company, like a direct competitor. So it's having that same mindset with the interim.
Yeah, is that sometimes it's no, you won't, but certain roles you say, yeah, okay, I know some of our interims might do it 1 or 2 days a month with someone else, or our client might only want them for 3 or 4 days a week. And then equipment, that's not much of one now, is it?
Not really. With phones and laptops, when IR35 first came about, I suppose they were a bit niche to come across, perhaps. Yeah. But these days, especially from a security perspective, you don't want the interim bringing in their own laptop a lot of the time. Financial risk is a big one. Probably almost, I'd say, getting up there as being almost as important as the main three.
It is with the CEST tool, isn't it?
It is. And basically, it falls down to a few things. So one of them is that the interim or the PSC will front costs before they start with you. So they'll be fronting their fuel, they'll be fronting their accommodation, things like that. But the bigger aspect of financial risk is if they drop the ball and something goes horribly, horribly wrong, they've got their professional indemnity and public liability in place to cover this. And if it were one of your own employees who'd dropped that, the company would pick that up. Whereas it falls to the interim. But also then it's about coming in, isn't it, and fixing that work.
Yeah, off your own time. So, let's say I'm an interim, I'm charging a day rate and I drop the proverbial ball. I've got to go in and fix that. I'm not going to charge them a day rate for that because I've got to fix it.
Employee benefits, from a best practice perspective, the interim or the PSC does not want to be benefiting from subsidised canteen, the Christmas turkey, attending leaving dues.
Yeah.
The list is endless.
Subsidised gyms.
Yeah, all of that kind of thing. Could you be caught? Probably. Would you be caught? Probably not. But from a best practice perspective, shouldn't be doing it. Premises. So as at this time of recording, it's not really much of a factor, as the majority of us are working from home.
Yeah, because I think sometimes with interims that have their own office, so if they're working from their own home, it makes it a bit of a difference. It still does a bit, but not as much because many people are.
Yeah, most people are at home at the moment. But the last one there is quite an important one. It says how they are identified. So if you've got M&S on site, for example, are you introducing them as Joe Bloggs technical manager working for or with Backova, someone like that?
Someone like that, yeah.
Or are you identifying them as, this is Joe Bloggs, he's an interim technical manager working through Corbin Fox, supporting?
Yeah. And when they sign themselves off, Jared?
Yeah, so emails, anything like that, I think from what we can understand is fine to have them on a company email, but they need to be signing off, and it's best practice to sign off as Joe Bloggs, interim technical manager or whatever. So in terms of hitting the factors, you don't need all three. Obviously, the more factors, those factors that you can get in there in both the contract and the working practices, the better. It supports your case further and further. But if we look at the Lorraine Kelly case, which happened a few years back, she was only outside of IR35 based on one factor, and that was the direction aspect of things. So from a substitution perspective, she couldn't substitute in. You don't expect to clock in the morning and see Jeremy Clarkson's face there instead of Lorraine Kelly. And also from a mutuality of obligation, there's a strong level of mutuality of obligation.
Yeah.
She has to be there. So that's the control as well. And there's long notice periods. But they couldn't prove that ITV was setting the direction of the script, because Lorraine Kelly writes the script. She sets what's going to be said. She sets the direction of the show. And that's how she fell into the outside.
Yeah, good example.
So in a nutshell, the current legislation, the PSC or the interim is responsible for deciding whether the contract is inside or outside of the IR35 legislation based on the factors that we've just gone through. At the end of the day, if HMRC chases anyone for any kind of inside outside queries, it will be the PSC or the interim. All liability sits with them, and that's the aspect which is about to change.
Yeah, the PSC is a personal service company or small limited company. New legislation. So new legislation applies to medium and large companies. So they're companies that are turnover of over 10.2 million, balance sheet of more than 5.1 million, or less than 50 people employed. And you need to have two of those to be to be a small company. And under that legislation, they stick with the old legislation. So the new legislation is for medium and large. It's worth considering as well, though, if you're part of the bigger group.
Absolutely. And also, if you're on that kind of cusp, so whether you're going up or whether you're coming down, it's worth.
Yeah, I'd be suggesting if you're small, looking at going large, I'd going medium. I'd pitch yourself as the medium straight away.
Definitely.
So the new legislation, there's two main differences to the new legislation, which is coming in the 6th of April. So the first one is that the liability, whereas the liability used to sit with the interim manager, the liability is now sitting with the fee payer. So let's say that let's say Greencore is a company, and they are paying the interim. If they get it wrong, instead of the HMRC coming after this company, they will come after Greencore or whoever the food company is. So they are liable for all the tax, and that is. And I think the thinking there is, instead of going to just one interim manager, going to a bigger company that has more interims there. That's the thinking. So companies like Barclays, GSK, a lot of the companies that have high usage of interims, they're being targeted.
You're catching hundreds in one hit, aren't you, really?
Yeah, if they are saying they're outside when they're actually inside, which we'll come to later. The next one as well is, and the liability is who actually pays the interim. The next one is who makes the decision whether the interim is inside or outside. Before it was the interim, now it is the end client. So where that work is happening, that is the person that needs to make the decision. And they make the decision using an SDS. Are we coming to that one yet?
We are coming to that one.
So the new legislation is called an SDS, Status Determination Statement. And that's basically a statement to say, based on the factors that we've already discussed, whether this assignment is going to be inside or outside IR35. So that needs to be carried out by the end client, and it needs to be based on the factors that we mentioned. It's on workplace, on the working conditions, how they're actually working, but also on the contract, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And then they need to marry, they need to tie together. They can't be, you can't just have it in the contract as, oh yes, we've got all of this, but then the reality of the work is completely different. It just won't stand up.
No, exactly. And it needs to be fed back to the interim before they begin with reasons.
And this process has to be carried out with reasonable care. And the reason why it's been put in reasonable care is, at the moment at least, there is no definition from HMRC as to what reasonable care is. We know some of the things that, however, that aren't reasonable care, so blanket decisions, so just classifying everybody as inside or outside for that matter is not reasonable care. Basing it off of previous roles, again, it's not reasonable care because the workplace practices could have changed. You know, you may have different clauses, so you might not allow a substitute with someone else, for example. So again, the factors come into play. And just I suppose just making a decision without any justifiable reason is again not reasonable care. And the interim or the PSC can object to the SDS. And if they want to do this, they have to come to you with reasons as to why they believe the decision made is incorrect. The end client will have 45 days to respond to this. And there'll be two outcomes, either from doing your further research and kind of reasonable care, you decide, actually, we've made the right decision here and this is why. Yeah. Or you are wrong, which happens with everybody. And in that case, you have to rescind your previous SDS and issue a new one with new reasons as to why this SDS is being given.
Yeah.
At the moment, there isn't an independent process, so it could cause some friction in time, but the liability and that end decision will always stay with the end client.
Yeah, and I know we handle objections ourselves.
We do, yes, we definitely do. And that comes on to slightly with what's going on here. So the CEST tool, which is the checking employment status for tax tool, is from HMRC. And what you do is it presents you with a list of questions, which will be the same every single time. But you go through, you fill out these questions, it's got selected answers, and it will give you one of three outcomes. It'll either give you off-payroll working rules don't apply, so the interim or contractor would be outside. They do apply, so therefore they'll be inside, or it's unable to make a determination, which is not a great deal of help to anybody. It has been updated. It is a work in progress, and we'll come on to one of the reasons why that is with the positives and the negatives. So it's great for the black and white decisions. So the decisions which are very much outside or very much inside. It is, since updating it from last year, it's stopped making snap decisions on substitution. Before it was, if you couldn't allow a substitute, it was instantly inside, which, as we can see from the Lorraine Kelly case earlier, that is not the case. The big perk, it is free, 100% free. You can use it as many times as you like.
Yeah, and I think it's worth doing that because the HMRC, it's not like a big brother check. You don't have to put your log on details. No. It's just an easy tool to use. So they're not, it's for your own benefit. So it's worth trying it out a few times.
Definitely. And it's great for checking current contracts or future contracts, or even past contracts as well. Yeah. It's perfect for that. And I know we do that. We've helped in interims through that, and we do that ourselves with some roles as well. Yeah, we do, yeah. There are downsides, as I was saying about a moment ago. So the big one is that mutuality of obligation is not part of the CEST tool.
And there was a case recently late last year, and it was mutuality of obligation was the reason it was outside, and the HMRC were put under pressure to get it into their CEST, but they haven't done that yet, have they?
No, and it is such a big factor, the mutuality of obligation. I know, for example, we've had contracts where interims have fallen outside of IR35 just based on that factor.
Yeah, we have a legal partner we use, so we do something similar, but I think we're going to come to that.
But yeah, exactly right. The questions, and especially not as much the questions but the answers as well, are very vague, and they're very confusing.
They are not for us now because we got our head around it, but yeah. So that's why I'd recommend people have a look at it before they use it for real. Just check it out, and if you want to give us a call as well, I'm fine with that.
Absolutely. And the last one there is that despite HMRC saying that they will stand by this in court, there is also the further small print of they will stand by it in court if you filled it out according to how they would fill it out, which based on the point above that one, it puts it in a very poor light, really. But the court case underneath there is a case where HMRC didn't stand by the CEST tool. Basically, the individual of RALC Consulting was deemed inside. He used the CEST tool as a way to prove his innocence, so to speak.
Yeah.
And HMRC said, well, your contract was before the CEST tool was created, therefore we don't want that. That can't be used as evidence in court. As you can imagine, though, HMRC were laughed out of court on that matter, and that individual did win that case. But as we were saying, there are alternative ways of checking, like Den was saying, we've got our legal partner, haven't we? Yeah.
Listen, there's other tools out there. I know a lot of the umbrella companies have their own tools. We actually carry out a workplace assessment we have an interview between ourselves, our legal partner who actually represents companies in HMRC Challenges. So ourselves, our legal company, and our client, and it's basically a 20-minute interview, and they ask questions around similar to CEST really, but they included mutuality of obligation, and that we've been doing that since 2019.
Yeah. There are other tools out there though as well. A lot of the umbrella companies, they've got their own tools.
Yeah.
It's always worth having a look at.
So I think
what are the options then?
Yeah. So listen, if they're outside, that's fine. But if the contract is inside, then there's a few options. So by and large, they're probably going to fixed term contract where you will have to take out the PAYE and the employees' national insurance, and you will have to pay employers' national insurance on top. You can put the company through an agency's umbrella or an agency's payroll, or there are some umbrellas out there who through their payroll. Or you can potentially just review the contract and review some of the working practices, so which could bring it outside. So you may look at mutuality obligation or substitution or any of the other things we've mentioned, really.
And I think it's important to say here that these are the established options. There is a lot floating around online, which I know with our legal partner we've really.
Yeah, we've seen a few ones, and we've run it past them, and they're like, no. So I think there's a bit of that going on at the moment. So the impacts of the new legislation, well, I suppose the impacts are there's more interims are considering temp to perm contracts. There's more interims going for permanent jobs now. It will also filter out some of the cowboys from both an interim perspective and an agency perspective. So, for example, there are interims in there that are disguised employees that are actually inside IR35 who shouldn't be doing what they're doing. So we'll take them out. And also there are some agencies out there who are putting interims into clients, and they're not giving the service, so they're not talking to the interim about IR35. They're not supporting the client with SDS, with objections, with what they should be doing. So that should be all happening. And so it will take those people out, I think.
And with contracts as well, making sure that the workplace,
yes,
that, they match up.
Yeah, because the contract and the T's and C's should completely match up with what the workplace, 100%. And they should be having that conversation beforehand. I agree. Some of the problems that the impacts there will be some interims just won't consider fixed term contracts. They may decide to up their rates. It can create a bit of a headache where clients go direct with interims if they don't understand IR35. So, for example, delivering the SDS, understanding legislation, handling objections.
Yeah.
Obviously, we can do that because it's our bread and butter, but it can be a bit of a headache and take a bit of management time. And as I said, some interims won't work inside.
There have been, and there will continue to be HMRC challenges, but to put it into perspective, there's about 1.7 million people doing interim or contracting as their full-time profession. The number of HMRC employees, investigators, I should say, is nowhere near that figure. The links there at the bottom are to the court cases between 2001 and 2018, which HMRC have brought to court. Quite heavy reading, but it's well worth going through if you've got the time, and signing up to Contractor Calculator and Contractor UK as well. Sign up to their email distribution list. They put out some really very useful articles. But between 2001 and 2018, there were 31 court cases brought to court. This is not the ones that were settled outside of court or anything like that, just the ones that made it to court. There were 31 in that period of time, and HMRC won 13 of those. But more interestingly is the last 8 years of that. So between 2010 and 2018, half of those court cases, so 15 court cases, were brought in by HMRC, and they only won 2.
I think that shows that clients understand IR35 and off-payroll a lot more than they used to, and they use interims for the proper reason. And also interims consultants out there, they understand IR35 as well.
Absolutely. And I think it goes to show as well, there isn't as much of a need, there's a lot of scare, isn't there, about HMRC getting everybody. And
I think, there is. And personally, I think they'll be targeting the big companies, but if we saw it and it was rolled out in the public sector, and there was a big worry. But public sector, they're using a lot of interims again because they realise there is a need for them. And as long as you understand the factors, I think a lot of it is because people didn't understand it. Once you understand the factors, then it's a lot easier to manage.
Absolutely, and that's one of the big things to remember this time around. Despite the legislation changing, those factors are exactly the same.
So things you can be doing now is, forewarned is forearmed. So obviously we're letting you know what's going on now. I would understand your interim. So how many interims have you got out in how many interims have you got in your business? Where are they from a contractual perspective? When are they due to finish? And if they are going to be finishing after April the 6th, then you will need an SDS. I would be challenging your agencies. They should be supporting you. So if you're getting interims via a recruitment agency like yourself, they should be on the phone to you and telling you what they're going to be doing and supporting you with SDS, with objections, and also supporting your interims. I would start using the CEST tool. I do think it's a good tool. I know it's got a few challenges, but I do think it's a good tool. And I'd start carrying out you need to be carrying your workplace assessments out now if that's going to happen, and your CEST will help with that, and create an issue in SDS. So the SDS basically is, for example, if we do that report for with our interims, or if you do the CEST tool one, that will create a report, and it will say whether it's inside, and you can just say, based on this report, they are inside or they are outside. And you just keep that in your filing. I'd also obviously send a copy to the interim, but it's as simple as that. There's a few myths out there. People are saying, well, I'm a consultant, so I'm okay. That's not the case. International work is outside. International work can be outside IR35, but if it's a UK-based company, then it's not. It needs to be considered. Multiple contracts are outside. It does definitely help, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're still outside. It's easier using sole traders. It's not. It's probably more complicated. because the sole traders, the employment status legislation.
IR35 is right. Well, IR35 doesn't affect them. However, employment status does, which is very, very similar to IR35. But I know we don't use a great deal of sole traders.
I don't think we use any now. It must be the same as similar contracts. You explained this earlier, Jared. Just because it's a similar role, it doesn't necessarily mean it's both inside or both outside. I'm a shift manager, so I must be inside. Not necessarily. We had 2 shift manager roles with 2 different companies within a few weeks. One was inside and one was outside. And it was down to things like mutuality of obligation, and it was all control.
9.
And control as well. So
I think that's the biggest takeaway from this, isn't it, really? Especially with the myths, is that the majority of these is that it all comes down to the factors.
It all comes down to the factors. So people saying, oh, I'm doing a maternity cover, or I'm doing a project, or I'm doing
recruitment fill, or whatever.
Or it's a new role. It's all down to the factors. And the final one is substitutes are not allowed, so they're inside. I've had clients saying, well, we won't allow substitutes, so it's not happening for us. Well, that just because you don't have that factor doesn't necessarily mean it's still a problem.
So that rounds us, really. I think, like we're saying, get your head around the factors. If you've got that, then you're there. Well, you're halfway there at least.
And send us if you want. If you want a copy of this, we'll send you a copy. Well,
yeah, we can send you the slides. Obviously, you've got the video there on a permanent basis. But if you've got any questions, email us or give us a call. We're happy to field those.
Thank you very much.